talking. Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today for our second webinar of the day, dedicated to exploring ROKBOX's impact upon sustainable working practices. I'm Verity and this is my colleague Harriet. We're going to chat to you for about 30 minutes or so before leaving plenty of time for Q&A at the end. It's our aim to leave this webinar with 3 potential outcomes. Maybe you leave the webinar today wishing to educate yourself even more, feeling inspired to learn as much as you can so that you're really well informed. Alternatively, maybe you leave today wishing to use your influence, so sharing what you know with those around you and those you connect with. Or lastly, maybe after today, you're ready to take practical steps. So taking action and implementing what you've learned in some shape or form. So I'm going to check back in with you at the end. I know it sounds a bit cheesy, but see what your reaction is to those 3 aims after the webinar or towards the end of the webinar. Before we really get going, it's worth mentioning what we're not going to be talking about much in the webinar. We're not going to go into lots of detail about the ROKBOX crate or the hardware range or the superior protection that ROKBOX affords your artwork. We're very happy to talk about it any other time, but today we're going to focus on just sustainability. Book a session with us, drop us a line if you want to talk about any other aspect or continue the conversation about sustainability. Also, as we're all well aware, sustainability is a really wide-ranging topic, and there'll be many different levels of knowledge and perhaps enthusiasm amongst people on the call today. Wherever you are in your sustainability journey, welcome. We hope you find this session useful, and we're especially grateful to those of you that have joined us today for what we now realise is actually a prime holiday week in some parts of the world. There's also a lot of people on the call who already use ROKBOX, either because they own 1 or 2 or a small fleet, or they've rented ROKBOX through our rental scheme, ROKBOX Loop. So seeing all of you, but especially those people on the call, is really exciting. We get this sense in our little office of this community that's growing, made up of people such as yourselves who are already changing behaviour or who wish to change behaviour. So, and we know it comes with challenges, so having you join us is especially meaningful. Thank you.
So we're going to start today by talking a little bit about sort of the more general aspects of behaviour change. If you do have any questions, by the way, we're going to leave so 10-15 minutes towards the end. So please do put your questions in the Q&A section and we'll have a little session at the end. We're going to start with a more general sort of behaviour change sort of theory possibly and some sort of larger ideas. And then we're going to get down to some data and specifics towards the end, talking about ROKBOX. So we know that most organisations would like to have greener and more sustainable practices. A recent study done by the People's Climate Vote said 80% of people want government to take stronger climate action, while 69% of people said they're actually willing to pay for greener practices. This is really, really true about how we mostly feel, but when it comes to actual behaviour change, there's something a bit harder in that process. People can often feel slightly powerless when it comes to climate change. They feel it's so big, it's so heavy that these small little changes, why even bother? Is it even going to help? Are we all doomed? I mean, there is a sense of that. And then similarly, there's people who feel that it's maybe, you know, again, they can make little impact. It's not really their personal responsibility. It's governments or large countries who are doing so much, you know, damage to the environment. Why would one small change on their behaviour make a difference? What we want to explain is why everyone making small change incrementally moves the whole scale. Everyone moves on and then people come along with them. So we can see a sea change in behaviour. Small things can roll into larger things. So what we're going to talk about to start with is how ROKBOX as a new green organisation can help people adopt these greener practices. We've come up with what we think are 3 key solutions to how you get people really energised and making decisions about changing their behaviour. The first one is simplicity. So don't add too much complexity to your new product, to your new green technology. A good example of this is a reusable coffee cup company, in Seattle, basically made these brand new, amazing reusable coffee cups. And they were used, could be used hundreds of times. And they were, so green and a fantastic initiative. But each time you wanted to buy a coffee, you were suddenly confronted with a list of questions like, can I have your credit card details, please? Can you fill in this form? What's your date of birth? How do we get the coffee cup back? All these things where essentially someone just wanted to buy a coffee. The complexity basically put people off, and so they didn't actually go for it in the end. So it's got to be proportionate. It can't be too painful. So that's the first solution. Keep it simple. The second one is cost, an obvious one, but the price does need to match the quality of the service. Whilst in general, a few people will pay extra for green, you're not going to get a whole flood of movement unless you've got a price point that's attractive to everyone. And new technologies often don't have economies of scale, so they are a little bit more expensive. But there's ways around this. You can have the government, for example, easing behaviour. They can either tax or subsidize something. In Europe, we have taxes on polluting vehicles. Also, plastic bags in shops, they can cost up to, very small amounts, a few cents. But it does really stop people from buying single-use plastic bags and starting to think about using the cotton bags. If you tax polluting vehicles and then put subsidies on electric vehicles, so it's much cheaper to buy an electric vehicle. We're seeing in Europe, especially, a lot of people now buying electric cars. There's even an initiative in France where they're starting to ban domestic flights for very short journeys, but that's only if there's a really great infrastructure of trains in place of it. So what they're doing is they're encouraging a greener route, but they have to make sure the service works and is cost effective. There's another way of bringing down costs, and that's through collaboration. So working closely with companies or other industries, and what that could do is help spread the costs out further. At ROKBOX, one of the key industries we're working with is the insurance industry. So the insurance industry has been fantastic at promoting green industries. They're often the grease that makes things work. And they also see the dangers that comes with climate change. There's more flooding, there's more wildfires, there's more risk to valuable artwork. So if we can work with insurers to bring in greener technologies, but also technologies that are safer and better for the environment, then what we can see is we can see costs reducing in other places. Another sort of collaboration is with shippers. So we've worked very hard with shippers, and we'll talk a little bit about Loop later, but we've had shippers who move things around. They're fantastic at, at logistics. We have sea freight being used a lot. How can we piggyback on other people's sea freights? We've had trucking as well. Can we use other people's trucking and other people's warehouses? And people have been very receptive to allowing ROKBOX to use these. I'm talking sort of Gander and White, Detail, Hass & Co. and Helitrans specifically, who are our shipper partners. The final point, so I've talked about simplicity and I've talked about cost. And the final point is, what is the prevailing mood? How do we reflect concerns within our society? We want to make sure that people are coming along with us with our idea. And as I've said before, as you look, as we talked about the earlier vote, or people are really keen on sustainability. They want a more sustainable lifestyle, and they are willing to pay for it. So how can we use that feeling to bring people along? Verity talked about, a network of people all here listening now. That's what we feel that network is. How can we bring everyone along to make those decisions? We can share information, we can share services. The GCC is like a fantastic example of that. Anyway, so Verity is now going to talk a little bit about how these three things relate to ROKBOX, and how ROKBOX is also a green technology that we can make sure that it's easy to use and we can make behaviour change happen.
Thank you. Firstly, Harriet spoke about simplicity. We've spent 8 years designing a product and service to make your life a bit easier. ROKBOX crates have now been available to buy for about 5 years and available to rent through our groundbreaking ROKBOX Loop initiative for almost a year. ROKBOX Loop, the rental scheme, has come about through a radical collaboration between a small group of fine art shippers It's now operating in 13 hubs around the world and is a really exciting, game-changing initiative. Maybe we're a bit biased. We now have 2 different models of crate, one designed to be used 100+ times, that's ROKBOX Original, and one designed to be used 10+ times, that's ROKBOX Lite, and 3 different internal hardware systems for securing the artworks within, all of which are designed to be simple to use and reuse. All of this is in use out there in the world now and being used and reused by different elements of the art world. So that's museums, galleries, private collectors, fine art shippers, artists, auction houses, etc. The crates are available in standardized sizes, 8 sizes to choose from to buy and 4 sizes to choose from to rent right now. And those sizes relate to modes of transport. So, for example, upper deck versus lower deck in terms of air freight, again, to keep it simple. We do provide product guidelines and we offer demonstrations to make sure people know how to use the crates and hardware. But once you've been introduced to them, they're really very simple to use time and time again. Intuitive is a word we use in this office a lot with regards to the crates and hardware. So if you own a crate, it's really simple. You need it, you use it, and then you keep it safe until you need it again. But if you prefer not to manage your own inventory of crates, then ROKBOX Loop means you don't even have to think about what happens when it's empty and returning it to your base, or even storing it when it's not in use. To give you one example, we work with one fine art shipper who used their ROKBOX crates for anything over a certain value. It's become part and parcel of their daily working methods for running works around town or internationally over borders on their vehicles. It's making their life easier, saving time and materials and protecting artworks better. And in the process, it's keeping their clients happier as well. The second point Harriet spoke to is cost. We've worked really hard to make our retail prices similar to those of good quality wooden crates. Realistically, we know that you are on occasion going to be able to find a cheaper wooden crate in some instances, but will it be as good quality in terms of protection and will it be as reusable? We don't think so. Our retail prices are also published on our website, which means they don't fluctuate on any day of the week during busy weeks or months. They are what they are, and we're really transparent with our pricing. So the benefits of owning ROKBOX in terms of cost are obvious. You buy it once and then you keep reusing it as many times as you want, and you've only paid for it that once. In terms of rental, you get to access a really good quality crate, but for a fraction of the price of having it made. Plus, if you rent it, there's no cost for having it destroyed at the end of its use, unlike if you had a wooden crate made just to use for a few days. When you rent, you can choose from 1 week, 1 month, or 3 monthly rental periods. If you've got a project which requires a slightly different time frame, we can offer you something more tailored. And on that basis, you get a really good deal on your crating spec and price all in one go. In an ideal world, you'd never need to have a crate remade because someone gave you the incorrect dimensions for an artwork, or frame dimensions changed when an artwork was reframed and it meant the old crate was redundant and hence a new crate had to be made. But that does happen. That sort of thing happens all the time in our experience. The internal design of ROKBOX means that it's more forgiving when it comes to slightly different dimensions, which means that there's no refitting or wasting of materials. Plus, if you've rented that crate and it turns out the dimensions are wildly out, we can just exchange it for a better suited crate. No big deal, no fuss, no expense, no massive pile of waste either, unlike if you were having to have wooden crates made time and time again. The last point Harriet covered was about the prevailing mood. There's a myriad of ways that you as an organization or an individual in the art world can reduce your carbon footprint, reflecting this tidal wave of energy that's being put into this area. Reducing the amount of single-use packaging is just one area, but it's a significant part of this equation. That's why single-use packaging has been or is being disincentivized in other areas of our lives, as Harriet's already reminded us. So all we're doing is taking the logic from other parts of our lives and applying it to the art world.
So that's sort of a general overview. We've introduced ROKBOX and products and some ways that we think that we can change behaviour. We're now going to get a little bit more specific. There's going to be some data and some graphs, which is very exciting. Verity's going to start off by talking a little bit about reuse.
Before I get started on reuse, let's get something straight. We're not saying that wooden crates are bad. And we're not saying you must never use a wooden crate again, because for a start, that just isn't realistic. We all know that some wooden crates, many wooden crates, are beautifully crafted and will house their precious contents for years and years. And maybe the requirements of the contents are so specific that only a bespoke wooden crate is going to do the job appropriately. That's great. But other crates, other wooden crates, are simple throwaway items. They're designed to be convenient, used maybe once or twice and then binned. These are the ones that we believe are ripe for change. So why does ROKBOX provide a better alternative to these sorts of wooden crates and types of behaviour? At its most basic, it comes down to reuse. One of the key benefits of reuse of ROKBOX is its huge reuse potential. As already mentioned, ROKBOX Original designed to be used 100+ times, ROKBOX Lite 10+ times. It's so obvious that it's even visible. Reusing something means that less has to be made and less has to then be thrown away. Reduce, reuse, recycle, we all know that. So for a moment, if I look at some of the people on this call, I think most of you will have a range of projects on your desk. Some of them might involve one work or tens of works, or perhaps even into hundreds of works. How many of those artworks across all those jobs on your desk require a crate to be made? And at the end of those projects, how many of those crates can be reused, which might involve relining of the wooden crate internally, refitting it, maybe a few, that's great. At the end of those projects, how many of those crates can be repurposed into other things? So we hear about beehives being made, children's playgrounds being constructed out of old wooden crates, kitchen units, all kinds of things. People are really ingenious. But how much does that actually repurpose all the amount of crates that are being thrown away? We think a fraction. How many of those wooden crates across all the jobs on your desk are going to be disposed? The majority, probably. So just imagine for a moment, if you could replace those crates with something that's reusable, what would that look like in terms of reducing the amount of waste? And we work with one of our customers to figure out these numbers. If an auction house replaced just 10% of their standard crates with reusable crates, then they would save approximately 96 tons of waste per year. 96 tons of waste a year. That's the equivalent to a massive skip or dumpster, whatever you call it, per week of visible waste. So 52 skips a year, that is massive.
So that was talking about the visible waste and the power of reuse. I'm going to go a little bit more detail into the life cycle analysis that we had done by Stitch, who are the Sustainable Tools and Cultural Heritage. And we're going to share a few graphs. So Sustainable Tools and Cultural Heritage are a group of conservators and academics from the US. They did a life cycle analysis of wooden crates originally versus the fiberglass turtle crate. And when we saw this, we said, well, we've got to do one for ROKBOX as well. So they kindly extended their program and did one for us as well. And you can see the results in the graph. So what it shows is it takes every single item that is used to create a wooden box, a fiberglass case, or a ROKBOX original. It looks at where they come from in the world. It factors in the distance they may have traveled. It factors in all their manufacturing, whether there's a lot of manufacturing or just some hammering, for example. And then it takes in also that disposal at the end. That is the light grey section of the graph. If you look at the black section of the graph, that is a transport, a one shipment basically. And I think the shipment is from, sorry, I know the shipment is from New York to Miami. And it's a fine art artwork that gets transported as a comparison to compare all different ones. The production and disposal, the real key there is reuse. So if we're reusing that case over and over again, what we can do is we can reduce that amount of grey. If you're using it once, if you're using it twice, and then you're throwing it away, that is just gone. That is work and carbon that has just disappeared in that one item. If you are able to reuse and reuse and reuse, you can get that grey further and further down, smaller and smaller and smaller, because you're dividing it by the number of uses. With the single trip wooden case, this large amount of grey could definitely be halved or quartered, you know what I mean. Reduced, that's the one. The more you use it. The problem is that often when you try and reuse a single trip wooden case, it's not designed for it. So you're going to be adding in extra things. You're going to probably be putting them on plastic. So that grey doesn't go down as much as you think it will go down. The great thing about the turtle case and the ROKBOX cases is they're redesigned to be used lots and lots of times. That's why we've developed them like this, so it's easier to repurpose and reuse. That's sort of the obvious thing about reuse, but there's a second part, which is the transport, and that's all about weight. So if we can keep the cases very light, we can reduce the carbon footprint. The reason is it takes energy to move something, and the heavier something is, the more you need to use more energy. So if we can make the case very, very light, the frame very, very light, and then all the weight you're really transporting is just the artwork, you can reduce the transport CO2. And that's the black bit on your graph. And it shows that ROKBOX Light, which only weighs 12 kilograms, it's incredibly light as opposed to the traditional single trip wooden case, which is probably 50 or 60 kilograms. That reduction in weight just takes all that carbon footprint out of the shipment, out of the transport side. So that's looking at carbon. But this only shows a small part of the story, because carbon is the major thing that we count. I'm showing you another graph now, which is actually other impact categories. Now, these are other things that impact the environment negatively, that we don't count, we don't measure, we don't really even know about, but they are things that are severely bad and damaging to biodiversity, to public health, to all these things. I'm going to read a few examples. You've got ozone depletion, carcinogenics, ecotoxicity, and respiratory effects. Now, ozone depletion, I think a lot of us have heard of that, is a thinning of the ozone layer. What that then increases is the number of ultraviolet rays that land on the surface of the Earth, and this can cause skin cancer. Ecotoxicity is a biological, chemical, or physical factors that cause stresses to the ecosystem. And that's sort of toxins within a water supply or within something that we eat or anything like that. And respiratory effects is how things impact our breathing, but not just our breathing, also other animals, other biodiversity, how they also take in air and release it. What these things show is that in every single case, reuse is key. The more you reuse something, the less the impact is. And over every single category, ROKBOX and Turtle do much better because we reuse and we reuse. So we're better on the carbon footprint, and we're significantly better in these other impact categories that no one is even counting yet. But we know that people are going to start paying a lot of attention to these things, especially when they affect public health. So this is something to watch out for in the future. Next, I'm going to talk just really quickly, because we're doing a lot of talking, about manufacturing and disposal. So we aim to make things as locally as possible. We are a UK-based company, so therefore we make our ROKBOXes in the Midlands. The original case we actually make in the Midlands in the UK, and the light cases we make in the Netherlands. So again, for us, that's local. What we then have to do is we maybe have to ship them to a client in America, but what we aim to do is use everything sea freight where possible. We also ask our suppliers where their suppliers come from. So we do insetting. We look at our suppliers, we ask them how they get their energy, we ask them where they get their products from. We make sure they resource all their items responsibly. And we also make sure they try and, where they can, get their energy responsibly. We can't necessarily control what our suppliers do directly, but we can pick and choose which suppliers we use, and to make sure we use the ones who are aiming to be the most responsible. There's a lot of factors to build in here, and we're still doing a lot of research to make sure in every single element we can reduce our carbon footprint, but there's still work to do. There's still evidence to gather, and that's something that we're going to keep doing as we grow. So what happens at the end of life of a ROKBOX? We can, with both cases, recycle almost every single item. The ROKBOX light specifically has been built in one type of product, polypropylene, and in the UK that can be recycled in the domestic recycling. There's like two elements of it. There's the screw and also the seal around the outside that do need to be removed, but everything else is made of the same material. In the UK, it can go in domestic recycling. That may not be true around the world, but what we're doing is we are reaching out to various recycling plants, people around the world to see how we can get ROKBOXes at the end of their life to these places where they can be reused or recycled. So that's a project for us. It's a large network that we're going to have to build out because our cases go to Asia, our cases go to America, we have cases in Australia, Seoul and Korea. I mean, they're everywhere. And as we know, recycling is not at all the same thing in different places. So this is something for us to work on and a project that we're taking very seriously. But what we can do is we can repair where we can repair in majority of cases where things are maybe slightly damaged or where things have got, again, a part that can be replaced. And we can also look at reusing different areas of the boxes where possible. It's a project and we're very excited about it. We feel as we go, we can become more and more responsible. But again, we'd love feedback from you. If you have any idea of different processes or way of doing things, do let us know. You can add it in the chat here if you want, or email us separately. I think that's me for a bit.
Thank you, Verity.
I'll let you go now, Verity.
So we've covered a lot of ground. Why reuse is so vital. Obvious, but vital. Harriet's shown you some statistics which are very compelling, which were put together by Stitch, and basically the proof behind the packaging, including the wider impact of traditional crating versus ROKBOX on the environment, so looking beyond just carbon footprint. And particularly why the energy and enthusiasm of people such as yourselves who are on this call now is so important, because bringing about change isn't always easy. And also the fact that the science is changing all the time, like the technology, recycling technology is changing all the time. So the recycling options available to us today are going to be even greater in the near future. So it's constantly changing, keeping us on our toes, which is good. So we're already doing brilliantly, but that's only going to get better and better. To go back to where we began, what are you going to do now? I gave you 3 options. Educate yourself being the first one. By the way, to assist you, if you choose to select that as your mission, we're going to send links to the life cycle analysis that Harriet has taught you through, as well as some further reading. Secondly, I suggested you could use your influence. So talking to those around you, the people you connect with. We're well aware, we work in an industry with lots of conferences. Maybe you're attending a conference, maybe you're presenting at a conference. There's bulletins, there's articles you may be able to contribute to. So there's all different ways you can influence people. Thirdly, I offered you another option, which is taking practical steps. So maybe after listening to us, you wish to start implementing change right now. There's all different ways you can do that. Harriet's mentioned other reusable crates. ROKBOX is one. We happen to be a bit biased. So obviously, if you'd like to follow up with a call about ROKBOX, that would be brilliant. And we would be delighted to offer people who've signed up for this webinar discounts, which are 20% off loop rentals and 15% off selected crates to own if they're booked by the end of July. So do get in touch with us about that, but we'll send all that through to you on email after this webinar. So feel free to drop any comments about your next steps in the Q&A. And if you haven't already sent us your questions in the Q&A, please do. So we have a little bit of time left. So we're going to pause for a moment, and our colleague who's off screen is going to let us know what questions you've already sent us.
So the first question is, what data do you provide for our internal carbon reporting, if any?
As in ROKBOX's internal. So what
No, what data
Could we provide our customers?
for a customer?
Oh, sorry, yes. So we have we basically work very closely with the GCC on our carbon reporting. What we can provide is, again, depending on the amount of information you can share on a per shipment basis, we can provide the weight and the CO2 for that particular ROKBOX that you're using. Again, you can provide us with details of exactly where it's going, and we can work out what the carbon footprint can look like. We have the capacity to, well, I mean, I say that, but it's basically me putting spreadsheets together, which I quite enjoy. But we have the capacity to measure all our different ROKBOXes on multiple different journeys, going sea freight, air freight, or by truck. We just need as much detail as we can from whoever it is and whatever shipment they're doing. So if it's a loop movement, for example, I will have to ask more questions. If it's done through a shipper, they may not be able to share all that information up front, so I can give a very good estimate. If it is from someone who owns a crate, you can feel free to send all that information to us, and we can break it down and show you how we make that calculation. So we are very open with our carbon reporting for both ROKBOX, which we've got, I think, our full carbon audit on our website. Or similarly, if you want to have each journey like laid out, we can show you what the carbon footprint of each journey is. We are working again with academics to also measure those other factors I mentioned, which currently we don't measure. There is a way that you can calculate all these things together. There is a methodology, but it's still quite early. And I think the GCC is also working on that. So keep your eyes peeled for that. That's something that we're also going to be working on. And what we hope is to share, as it advances, more information on that in the future. But at the moment, it's just CO2e. That's the kind of thing we're looking at, and we can help you with any of those kind of movements. Sorry, do you want to say anything, or is that?
No, we're delighted to help you calculate the difference you're making by using ROKBOX.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the next question is about damage. What if a crate is damaged?
As in, then what the end of life potential of it? Yeah. So if we had a crate that was damaged in the UK, we would aim to first of all repair where possible, second of all recycle, and the final case would be dispose responsibly. With the light case, as I've already mentioned, that's 100% recyclable. So in the UK, that's very easy. In the UK, we can repair majority of the original box, or we can harvest it for parts, and then there will be an element of it that may need to be responsibly disposed. If it's really far away, this is when it becomes more problematic. If we have a good network in place, which we have in some countries, we can aim to make sure it goes back to a proper recycler of polypropylene, or if the correct parts, we've got metal parts, for example, that's very easy to recycle. If, however, that country doesn't have that particular ability to recycle, or we don't have that network yet, our aim would be to bring it back if it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, then we'd have to dispose of it. So we would have to do that carbon calculation, and that is something that we are constantly doing and analysing to make sure we take the most responsible action. Because you can take a responsible action which sounds right on paper, but actually if you measured the carbon, it might not be the right answer. That transportation might end up taking much more than the case ever would have. So that's something that we're constantly working with, and each case needs to be taken on a case-by-case basis. A lot of puns of cases there. Yeah, so I think that's how we're doing it today. I think we can do better with building a larger network, but that's next part of the project.
And the network is growing all the time. Where we were 5 years ago, selling ROKBOX, if the network wasn't there, whereas now it's a much easier issue for us, which is a very positive position to be in.
This is a bit of a tricky question, potentially. So we've had a question here asking, did we, in our research and development phase, did we look into making a better, stronger wooden crate that could be reused more?
Where to begin? When we did our R&D, we wanted the crate to be as sustainable as possible. We also wanted superior protection, even though obviously we are not focusing on protection in this webinar. One of the pieces of literature, existing art world literature we referred to in our early R&D work is National Gallery of Art, Washington study, Art in Transit. And in that very comprehensive, that's basically how you keep art safe, as many of you will know that inside out. In their list of materials to use or not use, they say, if possible, don't use wood, which shocked us. And it's because wood is so fallible for all kinds of reasons, bugs, variations, how things change over time, etc., etc. It's not waterproof for a start. So wood wasn't ideal for us from the beginning because of protection. However, we're talking about sustainability. I would say the reuse potential of our crates is partly because of the internal design. The external, the shell of it, of both of them, is really robust. So it's going to last time and time again in a way that wood might be more challenged. But also the inside means you don't have to refit it when you put a different size work in. So it's just that much more adaptable, and you don't have that in a wooden crate, and it just wouldn't suit the inside of a wooden crate. And then even if you did put, am I making any sense? Even if you did put a wooden shell around that inside system, you'd end up with a heavy crate, which undermines the lightweighting argument for your carbon footprint, which Harriet explained.
Yeah.
I hope that made some sense.
Okay, great. We've got 2 more questions.
Okay.
So this question is about how many times the crates can be reused. So we have we said 100 and for the original and 10 for light. Was this worst case scenario? Could they last more shipments if they're taken good care of?
So the first answer is yes, this is worst case scenario.
As in it's modest.
As in it's modest, yeah. So we say 110. So this obviously is built to be the original with 100 uses is built much more robust. This is made of a very strong but also hollow plastic, which we've done forklift testing on, and the side of the panels are made out of what you make what you have on the side of a truck. So it's incredibly robust, and we've done multiple iterative tests on it to make sure that we are happy with minimum 100. If you look after it carefully, it's going to last a hell of a lot longer. If you look after it really badly, it's probably not going to last as long. That's what we would say. But fine art shippers are people who are experts in their trade. They look after things pretty well, and this is very robust. With the light case, because it is a newer product, we put 10 as our tentative out on the market. There is when we screw it in, there is a thread within the screw as you screw, which we felt was the first thing that would go. And that's why we've given it 10 uses. But having said that, we have a client called a Canadian shipper called Artverb, who have used their light cases up to 25 times now, and it's still going. So it's very much about how you care for the product. We are protecting ourselves by saying 110, because also if you haven't, if you aren't looking after it, that is the risk that it could last just that length of time. But we know it can last longer if you take care of it.
110 is very conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so and then this is the last question, which is in 2 parts.
Okay.
So the first part is ROKBOX Lite more of a local sort of pickup tool, cardboard box replacement, or can it be used for internal shipment? And so answer that, and then I'll.
At first glance, yes, it looks like light is more suitable for local deliveries and collections, perhaps card pack replacement. Get what you're saying there. However, not only have we tested it, but also it's being used for international air freight all the time. So although it is really lightweight, it is also really strong. It's the expanded polypropylene that it's made of. It's made of the same stuff that's in cycle helmets. That's why I've got my hands up here, sorry. So we literally use it to protect our skulls. So that's why it's suitable for air freight, because it's really lightweight, but it's super strong.
And what is the empty weight of the ROKBOX original and the ROKBOX Lite? A similar, like comparable. So if you've got one that's the same.
Yeah, so we have, so probably the two best to judge is the one I had on the report, the life cycle analysis, the one that we showed in the graph. So the 1.2 by 1.2 Lite is around 12 kgs, which I mentioned before, and the equivalent ROKBOX original, which is sort of, we place it more around a museum crate, would probably be 40 to 50 kg. So what you're looking at there is probably closer to the commercial crate as weight, but still lighter than a museum crate. And it's considerably lighter than the turtle case. The turtle has some really fantastic characteristics, but it is quite heavy. So that's why on the graph, it's got quite a large transport cost. You know, the actual weight of shipping it around can be quite heavy, but it's got fantastic security and some other features that we really love about Turtle. Despite being our competitor, we still think it's a fantastic product, maybe again for slightly different uses than ROKBOX, we think.
Okay, and then we have time for one more. If anyone, there's one more question here, and we could probably take one more if anyone wants to put the last one in. But this is why would people use a light rather than an original? Is cost the main factor, or are there other factors?
Cost is important for some people, for obvious reasons, which we totally respect. I would also say that for some people who come from let's say a typically institutional background where the safest, like every level, they would also always do a supervised shipment. They might send a courier on a shipment. You know, it's absolutely the highest spec they can always go to. My guess is they're always going to, or in our experience, they will go for the most robust, which is ROKBOX original. People who are perhaps more commercially minded or are putting like what's the most sustainable option at the top of their agenda, they'll go for light. A third factor to consider is that particularly if you rent, you have a choice of hardware systems inside. And it might be that one system suits you better than the other, and that will move you in one crate's direction versus the other. So there's a few things. Cost does play a part.
Yeah, absolutely. I think no more questions have popped up. So we want to thank you all so much for joining us today. I hope that we've answered all your questions. If not, please email us, please get in contact. If you need anything else, we are here.
Thank you. We will follow up with you by email, and we really appreciate your time and interest and your great questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.